Please introduce yourself and provide a little background. When did you come to the islands, and what was your path to becoming a superintendent?
To say how I got to this place where I'm in this chair today has been kind of a unique journey, to be honest with you. I don't think I saw myself years ago sitting in a superintendent's chair, let alone sitting in an administrator chair. I fell in love with the whole idea of education early, and I spent several years, 16 or 17 years, teaching English, a couple history classes, and some criminal law classes. But I continued to go back to school, and so I ended up with a couple of graduate degrees, and with one of those degrees was an administration degree. And it just so happened that in the school that I was teaching in, there was a vacancy, and the district didn't get what they wanted at the time, and it was about the middle of July, and they came and talked to me, and all of a sudden I was a principal in that school for 2 years. And at that point, I decided I'd stay in this position as far as administration, but we had, of course, visited Friday Harbor, and we took a chance, and it was the only thing I applied for. And luckily, the superintendent at that time saw something in me, and that was this is the beginning of 14th year. So almost 14 years ago, I took a chance, moved to the island, began working in the high school and in the middle school, and it was just a fit. And I loved working as a principal at Friday Harbor Secondary Campus. And there's been several superintendents that have been here since I've been here. And just this last year, I started giving some consideration that maybe it might be time in my career to consider a move into this chair. And so I took the chance, said yes to it. Last year's superintendent gave me a year of internship and prepared me for it. And so here I sit. I don't think ever in a million years did I think that as I took over superintendency, we would be in the middle of a pandemic. That was a unique twist to it. So that's a journey that I took. I've been an educator pretty much all my life. It just happens that even though some reluctant to move into administration, has been some of the best decisions I've ever made.
What are the key challenges that need to be addressed in order to continue quality educational programs and services for our youth while reducing the risk of the spread of COVID-19?
The biggest challenge is just making a remote setting both meaningful and effective. And that's really difficult. I believe most of us already believe that in-person education, that model is the best model when it comes to teaching and learning. The interpersonal interactions that we have gives us the ability to read nonverbal cues, and teachers can relate in different ways. And we believe that in-person model is the best. So the challenge is really to ensure that we're intentional and creative in our planning for remote setting. And, I guess we want to say we want to try to recreate in a virtual world what we have in an in-person setting, and that's pretty difficult. And often the technology makes it even more difficult. Technology does not mean efficiency in all situations. In fact, we find that sometimes tech concern or tech issues become a red herring that move us away from what we really want to do, and that is focus on engagement and on the content. So the key challenges right now is creating a meaningful program, because we have made the decision to go remote. So our key challenge is addressing that concern and that need. That being said, though, we also want to return to an in-person program at some point in time. And we have developed a hybrid plan. We can probably talk a little bit more about that later. And we put in safety protocols. We've measured out rooms so that we can have social distancing. We've changed the entire district to a touchless system in all restrooms and sinks. We've ordered the plexiglass dividers like you would see at the grocery stores that are at all public points of contact. And even with all this, we're working with the health department to ensure safety. And we're just at a place where even though we believe what we have in place gives us an opportunity to start movement toward an in-person model again with safety, we're just not ready yet. And I think it's that transmission number that really is the key for us. But I have to say, financially and emotionally, in every which way, the decision to move back to school and ensure safety is a difficult decision to make, and we're not taking it lightly. We just believe the best decision was to go remote to ensure safety of both staff and students at this point.
What did you learn from your experience providing distance learning last year that is influencing changes and improvements for this fall?
When you consider what we learned from last year and what changes that we are including in this year's program, I want to back up and start and talk about what I think was successful first. I really see that there were 2 districts in the entire state that started within 3 days of school closures in March. And we were one of them. And so my hat is off to the educators of Friday Harbor. They really dug down deep, and within 3 days had put together a program using a learning management system that we already had in place, but not everybody used effectively at the time. And created opportunities for students that other districts weren't able to do. And they weren't able to do it because for a variety of reasons, but a lot of them started even a month later. We started right away. I also want to say that this has a lot to do with companies like Rock Island, who generously made sure that every student and family had connectivity. And when we had issues with connectivity, they got out there and they solved problems for free. And it says something also about the voters of this island who overwhelmingly supported the last capital and tech levy so that we could get a laptop or Chromebook into the hands of every student on this island that attends a public school. So we had the framework set to get started. What we learned is, I mentioned a red herring because I always want to make sure that we focus on what's the most important. What's important right now, and what was most important was creating a sense of engagement and giving opportunities for academic growth for all students K-12, and sometimes tech issues, or just an inability of a teacher to understand the tech created some inconsistencies. And what we heard in surveys from families in early June was that it was the consistency that was the issue. And what I mean by consistency was access to the learning management system. The learning management system that we use is Google Classroom. We have other software that we include as well. And not to go into all of them, but we use Screencastify, for example, which actually videos a lesson that can be uploaded into Google Classroom. But for example, I'll say that we use Zoom to have a class setting. But we found that there's about 6 or 7 different ways to get to Zoom. And teachers were doing it differently. And a family that would have a child in a middle school and in a high school and in an elementary, they would get confused because it was always done differently. Or if you go into Google Classroom, you can put assignments in one tab, or you can put it into the stream, and it caused confusion. And there was no fault of teachers. We had jumped into this so quickly that we didn't have an opportunity to discuss it. So what we've been doing over the summer, and we're going to do it even more specifically next week in our last little bit of training, is create consistent models for everyone. So that when someone dives into our learning management system, there is a definite pathway. That's what we're working on K-12. The other thing that we saw is that Zoom is a beautiful thing, but how much screen time do we want to have? And we're trying to determine the limits of Zoom. And let's take secondary, for example. A secondary teacher, they may Zoom in the morning, and they have the afternoon, the students are still doing school work. They just may not be in contact with the teacher. They can go back into the office hours and have intervention with the teacher. But often some of the work means more Zoom. So we had to determine how much Zoom we're going to do for each grade level, and we're still working that out. And I also think that one of the things beyond just the Zoom is determining what we've been working on, what works. We found out what didn't work, and we have moved those away from the lessons, and we're trying to find not just new things, but what we did do, can we do it better? And what's going to be better is that everybody has a better sense of how to use this tech than we did before. And that's going to improve the delivery and engagement in and of itself. And I'm a believer that this can't go to waste. Even when the pandemic comes to an end, even when we're back to in-person, there are too many lessons learned. We need to figure out how to incorporate this in meaningful and intentional ways moving forward.
What equity plan do you have to specifically address the diverse needs of typically underserved, underperforming students, such as those in low-income families, Black and Brown students, and students with disabilities?
When you ask about equity and how we plan to work with those who are underserved, or maybe those who have language issues because they speak and it's their second language. I honestly have to tell you that I felt like the move to remote exposed this issue even deeper than what we thought. And sometimes it's not a racial issue, or it's across the board. We have families that struggle. For example, I'll say one thing. For example, there are families like that have 3 or 4 children, and the broadband is not strong enough for them to make connections. Or we have families that have parents that have to work and they have to babysit their younger siblings. So reaching out is really a difficult process here. I truly believe we saw the issue more now than we ever did before. And for us, during this time and even beyond the pandemic, we have to be as focused and intentional about making connections with the entire community, all students. So how are we going to do that? Well, I think the first thing I want to talk about is the students with disabilities. Our special ed director, Becky Bell, put together a pretty impressive special education remote plan last year. And one of it was so good that she was asked to present it to the state just 1 week ago. They are modeling what she did. And maybe at another time, I'll try to be a little bit more specific about what she did. But we also know that creation wasn't the end. It wasn't enough. So this year, we are bringing in highly impacted students to the campus if the parents are willing to do that. I'm going to work with them on site. We also are taking at least one day where we're going to bring on what we call English language learners onto campus. And I also want to point out that sometimes an English language learner is not necessarily a student that can't speak English really well. The student might be able to speak English well, but the primary language at home is Spanish. So when it comes to academic vocabulary, he or she struggles determining what is being expected or asked by the teacher. And we want our English language learner teachers and support staff to work with those students. And so we're going to transport them onto the campus at least once a week. The other crazy idea I have, and I don't think it's crazy, I actually got this from an amazing previous superintendent, but is a liaison idea. And what we really want to do is create a family to school liaison where there's a point of contact for families in need. And really, when a family's having difficulty with their child truly engaging, it's not always just because they don't understand the content. There could be a variety of reasons. It could be the lunch service, or it could be that their child needs to babysit during the time teleschooling is happening and teachers don't know that. Or it could be there's something that Family Resource Center could help that family with. And what we want to do is create that connection with a liaison to have someone that families feel that they can reach out to. And actually, we want that liaison to reach out to some of those families. We're trying to create connections and break down the walls that keep students from feeling truly a true sense of belonging with our school. I also want to say that our school goal, based on the strategic plan that was developed last year, and we haven't had all the time in the world to fully create our action plans, but one of our goals in that strategic plan is to close the achievement gap. Those are not just words. If we're truly going to do that, we have to take action. And one of those actions is a liaison. We don't have the funding for that yet. We're still working on that. I believe we can and will get that funding. And I have some people in mind. And I think this liaison is a process that we need to utilize even beyond the pandemic, because the underserved need to feel like they're a part of our school because they're bright students. I will tell you one story I think is really interesting. If you know me, you know that I get along with students really well, and we enjoy just the conversation. So I sat down with a group of students that were underserved or people or of color just last year, and I asked some specific questions about why is it you think that you're not doing as well in this course or on this test as somebody else. And one girl, Hispanic girl, looked at me. She's just a fun girl to be around. She just looked at me and she says, it's because we don't know how to play the game. And I said, well, what do you mean by that? She says, well, the process is that we're first generation going through this. And our parents didn't go through this. And so they don't know how to help us and guide us. And your families have been in this system since the dawn of time. So then my question was, well, then how do I help that? So we began talking about, should we have some intervention classes that are in Spanish? Or how do we connect to families? And so I started asking students how to do that. COVID kind of stopped the process because those conversations ended because we went into isolation. But the message that came through to me that was loud and clear that kind of ties into this liaison idea is we need to create pathways for connection, because it's not a cognitive issue that causes students to grow that keeps that gap between white students and Hispanic students large. Because there's an intelligence there. It's the connection or the comfort that they feel to be a part of the system to some degree. And I think the liaison idea, our willingness to bring ELL onto the campus, our work in special education, along with our staff's dedication to this issue is really the key to making a difference now and in the future. And I will just say, simply put, I think that school district needs to be the leaders on closing the achievement gap and breaking down the walls of systemic racism. It's just, we're trying to create contributive citizens that are well-meaning and also understand what human decency is once they leave this campus. And we should be leaders in that, both in action and word.
What plan do you have to support parents and families who elect to homeschool their children or form neighborhood pods and need coaching and instructional materials to effectively teach their children?
What can we do for homeschool students or families that decide to put their children into pods? We try to get as creative as possible. We do know that teleschooling doesn't work for everybody. Because teleschooling is built on a schedule. They have the as live as you can get teacher support in a virtual classroom setting, but sometimes the time doesn't work for families. What we heard is that there are some families that they have the daycare, for example, they have grandma or grandpa, or they have connected with family friends to take turns while the others work. But because of that teleschooling time frame wasn't effective. So previously, superintendent here, the one that hired me, actually started Griffin Bay School years ago. And I think it was a boon for this district. I am a passionate believer in alternative learning experience. That it doesn't have to be just traditional. There are some students that it just doesn't work in the traditional model. But over the years, Griffin Bay School became more of a Griffin Bay High School only, where it served students who maybe were struggling in the traditional high school, and that was it. A year ago, we opened it back up to 3 through 12, and we had a couple of students that came in. And it was primarily just online, and those are good. It served a purpose, but what we did this summer was reimagine and relaunch Griffin Bay School, and we made it K-12. And what the idea is that it could serve all those people who were going to move to homeschool or were already in homeschool, or maybe it would serve those people who just couldn't fit into the teleschooling model. And for example, if you are a first grader, family has a first grade student, and you enroll in Griffin Bay, we would meet with you and develop an educational plan. We would provide the curriculum, and that could be online or it could be in traditional paper and pencil. We'd mail it out to you. Yes, the parent does the delivery. You work with your child, but you meet once a week with a teacher, and there is based on that plan, there's progress monitoring, there's maybe a restructuring of the curriculum, and there's coaching. If there wasn't a pandemic, we would probably open up the walls of our new Griffin Bay building, which is right next to Turnbull Gymnasium once it gets finished, and we would provide some study pods and tutoring time. But for now, what we're really trying to do is give families a chance to help deliver the education in another way. This took off. I did not expect what happened. As of Friday, we had to stop accepting enrollment because we're at 75 students. And we may open that back up to a few more. And that's just K-9. That wasn't the students we already had in the high school. That's 75 new students to this. And I actually had to hire another part-time employee to help with the first grade through fourth grade. And what's happening is that the teachers that are a part of it, they love it because they see the flexibility and they see the individualization that you can give each student. and the families are loving it because of the flexibility. But how it took off was a surprise to me. We have some families that have not been in the public school that are now a part of it because they're able to get the curriculum and get some support. They had homeschooled their families before. We've actually had quite a few students from the other islands that have asked to be a part of Griffin Bay, and we can't accept them yet because we're only allowed to take 10% of our enrollment can be out of district at this time, because we're what they call a single district alternative learning school. We're gonna ask to be more than just that because we think it fits a need. We actually had a student a family that believes that they have to leave for a year because of the economy and what their job was, but they did not want to lose contact with our schools because they know they're going to come back. And we couldn't give them access now because their mailing address is going to be somewhere else. We believe we're going to be able to once all the enrollment's set, and we'll fit that person into the 10% confines we have of the how many students we can have out of district. But I'm just saying what I'm trying to point out is that we saw the need for homeschool students and for families that wanted to do it in pods at different times. And we met that need with a flexible program called Griffin Bay, and it grew so fast, we didn't expect it. And we've had teachers working for the last 2 weeks, making contacts with those families, setting up plans, explaining the specific structure to it. And I'm excited about it, but I also know we have a huge workload in front of us to make this work effectively.
What safety protocols do you have in place for when staff and students return to the buildings? What protocols are in place should someone become sick with COVID?
First of all, we're guided by a document that was released by OSPI, and we have to do it in coordination with our own local health department, the governor's Safe Start Plan, LNI, and CDC. So there are a lot of documents that we have to bring together to kind of figure out what we will do when people come on campus. Well, when it comes to testing, we do not. There's no mandate that we would test students or teachers when they to come to campus. Not initially. What we have created, let's talk about the remote model first. Teachers are not mandated to work from campus. Several do just because they our internet connectivity is so strong, it's easier for them to work from their desk. I'd say several, maybe 50% of the staff will work from their rooms. They only go to their rooms. They don't go anywhere else on campus. And I think one of the things that is key here is that I have to stand for staff as well as for students. And we have a lot of high-risk staff here. And we don't want to put them in a position where they could contract this disease. Now, that being said, we have safety protocols that are in place. And for example, we did run a summer school program in the middle school that had 4 students in each section, and we had 8 students total. And when they arrived, there is a process of health questioning, health screening. Temperature is taken. When they go to their rooms, there's a specifically assigned seat. They are mandated to wear masks, and they are socially distant. We measured out the rooms. For example, if we bring in 50% of the population of students, we can fit students in about 95% of the rooms and be 6 feet or more apart from each other. So there were a couple rooms we may have to move that class to a bigger facility, maybe the gym or our commons area. But what we have are a set of protocols when someone comes in. We have a set of protocols if someone gets sick, and even if it's not COVID. they automatically have to go home, and they have to go through the test, they have to go through quarantine, and we limit their movement on the facility so that we can contact trace. When a teacher comes into work at in the school building, they identify that they are in the building, so we know, and they identify where they are in the building. And then there's just no interaction. When visitors come, for example, especially the first 2 or 3 weeks, let's say at the high school, because there's a lot of traffic usually from parents at a high school, the first 2 weeks of school coming in to pay pay fees or to get material or whatever. We actually are doing everything by appointment. And we even have locked the door, and we ask them to call a specific number, and we'll come out and let them in. And eventually, when the door is unlocked, they'll see the 6 foot, just like you see in the grocery store, the 6 foot distant stamps on the ground, only so many people in the office at a time. So we've created a process for doing this. It does not include testing. And so there you go. That's what we have at this point.
How many children depend upon school lunch programs and daycare? How do you plan to support them throughout the school year?
So last year in the spring, what happened was the governor came out and said that we could, there was a waiver that we could provide lunches to anybody that is basically age 1 through 18. So we immediately created unitized sack lunches that were really nothing more than a peanut butter and jelly sandwich in a lot of ways, and a breakfast. And we were able to take them to different sites on the island, and families could pick them up. Initially, there were over 100 families that were doing this. I think we ended up averaging 55 meals. We're just under 40% free and reduced on this school district. I think that it might be even a little bit higher if we, at this time, if we get the paperwork out to the families, i.e. that's one of the reasons why I want a liaison as well, to connect with families in need. We're a little bit different this year. We're not allowed to, the waiver wasn't provided for us to give it to any child 1 through 18. That if a student is free and reduced, we have to identify them as free and reduced, and they can have the meals. If somebody else wants to get a lunch or breakfast, they actually have to pay for it. Our lunch program is probably, in my opinion, second to none. And I am biased because I work in this district, but I don't know too many places where you go and have ginger chicken with roasted whatever. I mean, they're pretty amazing menu. Our kids eat healthy and they eat quality food. And what our program is called Food for Thought. And what the Food for Thought program is doing this year is not sack lunches. They've already put out a menu, and they will deliver. We have the cooks themselves will deliver at 2 different sites, including with a third site being a school where you can drive to. If you're free and reduced, you'll get the breakfast and the lunch. And if you want to purchase, you can do that online ahead of time and pick those up as well. And we believe people are going to, because the meals are so good, and it's going to be easy for families that are working to ensure that their kids are eating healthy by purchasing a quality unitized meal that our chef has prepared. So we're ensuring lunches to everybody in need and more. We're doing even more with that. Kudos to our staff at the food service program. Daycare is a whole nother issue. So in the spring, the governor mandated that school districts provide daycare to all essential workers and their families. And we tried to create that in spring, but we didn't have anybody take advantage of that. The waivers came to an end, so no school district is expected to do this. Even though we weren't expected, I've tried more than you know, more than I can show, to create opportunities for daycare, and we just haven't been able to establish that yet. We have been collaborating with family resources. We have been connecting essential workers and other families who are in need of daycare with Family Resource Center. And we've been able to kind of be a conduit for other families that are willing to take on other children in pods. We're not sponsoring the pods, but we've directed some families to that to provide the daycare. But it's interesting enough, we haven't had a lot of people ask for the daycare that we thought we would. And when they do, we have tried to meet their need as much as possible, but we don't have the specific answer for that.
Assuming that schools are closed, how are you planning to support students with physical, mental, or emotional challenges?
So when you ask how are we planning to support students with physical, mental, and emotional challenges, I did say that special education is a quality program, and we've grown that. I just want to point out last year, one of the things in special education that our director had the paraeducators do is we made contact with every special education student every day. There was individualized attention outside of a classroom for students in special services. And that's going to continue, as well as the on-site for high impact. But I am concerned about social emotional needs of all students. And what I'm finding is that even though students will, especially secondary, when they're on campus, they'll say they have 500 friends because it's all on social media platforms. And now what we're finding is that, which we knew before, that's not enough interaction for students. They need human contact. And Zoom is only a part of it. Zoom is better than nothing for these students. It really is something that's important. So we're very intentional with our social emotional programs. We use a program called Character Strong. We're going to continue to try to implement that in a virtual way. We have about 4 or 5 different counselors that are reaching out on a consistent basis to students. And we're hoping at some point in time we can create opportunities for physical exercise for them, for secondary students on campus. We can't yet. We're still in phase 2. And I know Island Rec is dedicated to trying to create something when they feel that it is safer. So the social emotional need is an important part of what we're doing in schools. And although the plans are not completely realized yet, how we're going to do that, besides our Character Strong program, it has to be something that is in the forefront of our minds. Students, whether they are kindergarten or whether they're a senior in high school, need human interaction. It's just who we are, and we're trying to make that happen as much as possible in these strange times we live in right now.
What are the costs that need to be considered? Where will the funds come from? What other community resources are you tapping to support educational programming goals?
There are a lot of COVID-related expenses that were unexpected. For example, we changed our facility to a touchless system, all facilities to a touchless system. That was $55,000 right up in front. And then, I said earlier how we have plexiglass dividers at every point of contact. Well, there's a lot of public points of contact in a school. And so that ended up being close to $20,000, not quite close. We've ordered PPEs and a lot of equipment like that, which again was another $20,000. What is beautiful is this community is extremely supportive. All of that, most of all of that was covered from a grant through the Community Foundation. They gave us $72,000 to help us with that. That just speaks volumes about the island that we live on and how people love our schools and the education that we provide. Additionally, Griffin Bay as I mentioned earlier, kind of mushroomed. So that is a cost that was maybe not expected, but necessary. Not only is it that we had to hire just a little bit more staff than what we had planned on, we also, if we're going to use paper pencil and not just online, we have to buy that curriculum, and then we have to mail it out if we don't have them pick it up. So there's a lot of that will add up when you're talking about 75 students potentially. So there's some startup costs and ongoing costs in Griffin Bay. And last week, for example, at the virtual fair, there was about just under $6,000 donated for startup costs. The San Juan Public Schools Foundation is putting their campaign toward Griffin Bay. But beyond that, what you have to know is that there's the fact that, let's say, for example, we come back in a hybrid model at some point in time, which we did present a hybrid model to our board. And our hybrid model is a little bit different than everybody else's because our teachers wanted contact with students every day. So instead of 2 days a week at like an AABB schedule, we went AM, PM. So we added transportation in the middle of the day. We're going to have to add a custodian to help disinfect and clean in between the two sessions. Now that may change, finances may cause us to change that idea, but we wanted daily contact. That says something about our teachers. They wanted to see the children they serve. And so there are extra costs. I'm not depending on the feds. Yes, we did get some money up front. The first installment that came from the feds, it equaled just under $80,000 that came to the district. We've already started using that to increase our Griffin Bay FTE, or teachers in Griffin Bay. We're probably going to use it as well to hire some more custodial support at some point in time. And then our biggest issue is that the state, we know, is in an $8.8 billion funk. That's what they're predicting. And if they have a $99 billion budget and they're losing $8.8 billion, in some way, shape, or form, that's going to impact schools. And we have to prepare for an allocation drop. And to me, it's more about year two. It's next year than it is this year. We feel pretty good about where we are financially at this very point to move forward. But even in the middle of this year, we're going to run into an issue because where the state really takes money away is in the formulas, and one of the formulas is in transportation. So we're going to lose some transportation dollars, which really could hit us in February, especially if we're able to get back into a in-person model. And so we're going to have to dip into some of our reserve funds to make this happen. And then we have to see what allocation changes are made by next May. So the truth is that we have a state and feds that I can't depend on. We have a community that really reaches out and supports us. And I'm not afraid to go and ask for some support. I've already done that. We've been given some money from some, for example, from the Community Foundation. And we have some other people that are already considering supporting. I got a call the other day about what can I do for Griffin Bay. And so there are well-meaning people on this island that want to help us. And so we're going to use whatever local funds that we get, and then we'll make the tough decisions in our own budget to move forward with as quality education as we can.
What thoughts do you have about how our communities can work together to support quality education in this time of crisis? What do you appreciate about working and living in this island community?
Of course, I could talk about finances here. That's definitely a support. How can we support each other financially? Not just the schools, but for an example, I think it's important that I do support even our local restaurants. I want them to know that we're kind of in this together. To be honest with you, for example, I'm not someone that used to go out a lot to eat. I don't know why. I drive home to Roach and I'm comfortable where I live. But I have made a point of making sure I went out to these restaurants because it was important that we supported each other, just like the community has been supporting us financially. I think it's even more than that, though. I think we have to give each other some grace because we have to know that we're making decisions with the information we have right now, and there's no one right answer. Or if there isn't a right answer, we could make the wrong decision at some point in time. Anybody can. We just have to believe in each other at this point. And that is part of the reason why I love living here, is I think we do that as a community. I think the other thing that's been really good about this is that not only is this district connected with a family resource center or with Island Rec or Community Foundation, a lot of different agencies to work through this together, and even some of the other private schools we have worked with. It's also, I've enjoyed my time since July 1st in this position, connecting with the other island superintendents, and as well as Dr. James often will join our weekly meetings, just to find out what we're doing and how can we support each other. Because we all had our own ideas, we all have our own unique issues on each island, but sometimes there's an answer that solves all of them. And just being able to bounce ideas off of other district administrators or even school site administrators on other islands has been refreshing. And I think that sense of community went far beyond just the island of San Juan. And in the end, I just got to say I think what drew me here 14 years ago or 13, whenever it was, it's what keeps me here is that there's more of a sense of community in San Juan Island than any other place I've been. And somehow we learn to, to use my old Idaho phrase, pick up our bootstraps and go to work. The fact is that we do. We know that we believe in the importance of human decency and in raising the child to be a productive and thoughtful citizen. And I can't say enough about being a part of that. Has been just truly invigorating over all the time that I've been here. And it makes me want to stay here and live here.
Thank you so much for your time today. And we're just really impressed with how you're preparing for the coming year with all of the uncertainties around it.